Welcome to Murder Road Trip. I'm your host, Haley. Joining me on today's road trip is Esther, the host of the Once Upon a Crime podcast. Esther, can you tell us a little bit about Once Upon a Crime?
Once Upon a Crime is a weekly true crime podcast. Each case is told as one story, but they're grouped together in a series based on the type of crime. So, for example, I'll do a series on kidnappings. I've done a series on killer couples, celebrity stalkers, Munchausen by proxy, and more.
Yeah, I love the way you do your show. Like 4 chapters, right, per series. And each series, like you said, has a different topic. And I love it because it's like 4 is the perfect amount because it's not too many, but it's enough to get just like a feel for that topic.
Yeah, and I can always try to find some that are a little different. So I might pick one that people know about, but I'll get deeper into the research of the why. And then I'll pick one that's maybe more obscure. So we kind of try to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, I like that you do more obscure cases. You're not just covering the big cases. You're like, yes, this is a big known case, but did you know about all of these other ones? You know, like it's not just this one. Let's look at all of these other ones. So I really like that. And I love the first of the month because we get to see what your new chapter is.
Oh.
And she never tells me, guys. I'm always texting her, what's the new chapter?
None of your business.
Gonna have to wait. I'm like, dang it. So where can listeners find you?
You can find me. The website is truecrimepodcast.com. I'm also on Twitter at Upon a Crime and on Instagram and Facebook at Once Upon a Crime Pod.
You also have a discussion group, right?
Yes, on Facebook.
Yeah, that one's really active. You just got over 1,000 members, right?
Yeah, just hit 1,000 members on that group. So it's a great group.
Yeah, it's awesome. I like to go in there and see what people talk about, and we discuss the episodes. We also discuss just true crime in general. I really like it. So, well, thanks for being my road trip buddy.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we will be snacking on barbecue potato chips because Kansas City is the barbecue capital of the United States. I grew up here, didn't know that until I was an adult. Because everyone always relates the South with barbecue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you think of like Texas
Memphis.
or Memphis, but it's actually Kansas City. And we're also going to snack on Russell Stover's chocolate, and that's because it started here and the headquarters is here. And we're going to make our way to Kansas City, Kansas, and Missouri, because it's on the border, to discuss John Robinson, who was a Kansas City serial killer. He's known as the internet's first serial killer because he met his victims in online chat rooms in the early 90s.
Oh, it's way back.
Like, I didn't even think we had the internet, let alone chat rooms in the early 90s.
Yeah, it kind of started that way. I kind of remember that. And it was also like early AOL. It's like, you've got mail. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That was way early.
So what made you pick John Robinson for today's road trip?
Well, I think we both came up with this idea because I'm actually here in Kansas, and I have never been here before.
So excited!
So I'm here in Kansas City, and it was cool. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be in Kansas. Let's do a Kansas case that's very local. And the more that I started getting to the research of this, and then when I came out and I realized all of these places are right here, like where I'm at, and that's really interesting. And plus, like you said, it's got this whole internet kind of part to it that's very interesting.
Yeah, and everyone in Kansas has talked about this guy, but nobody ever knows his name. They just always say, oh, the guy with the barrels. And you're like, which one? Because you don't think of, like, none of the Kansas City serial killers are famous. Like, the only famous Kansas serial killer is BTK. But we've had other serial killers like Lorenzo Gilliard. He killed prostitutes. He killed a lot of them, and he got away with it for a long time. And then we have John Robinson, who put women in barrels. We have Robert Berdella, who put, who did terrible things to his victims. Yeah. So we have all these serial killers, but they never make it huge. They're not a Dahmer or a Gacy or a...
Yeah, that's interesting, because once I started reading about this, I'm like, wow, how come I haven't heard more about this case?
Yeah. But everyone here knows about this serial killer that put people in barrels, but they never know his name. And I think I sent you a list, and you decided on this one. I was really excited because I actually didn't know, just knew the barrel thing, just like every other Kansan. And we were actually driving by, and we passed Troost Avenue, and I kind of patted her. I was like, it's Troost Avenue. I was like, this is the place.
I've read that sign before. I've read that name before on that street. Yeah.
It's like, let's not go here at night because it is sketchy. But I'm so excited you're here. It's really nice to record face-to-face with somebody.
Yeah.
We're literally face-to-face. We're not in the car. We're in the hotel room. And we're sitting face-to-face.
Yeah.
It's actually really nice. So I'm excited you're here and that we're going to talk about this weirdo. But yeah, he doesn't really have a cool name. He's just known as like internet's first serial killer.
Okay, he didn't get the Flash.
No, he didn't get a cool name.
He wasn't called Barrel Butcher
Right.
or anything like that.
I know. That would have been really cool, but he wasn't. So, all right, are you ready to go?
Yep, let's roll.
All right.
We lost the station again.
Keep trying.
Hold on. Let me try this one.
Stop. That's it. Turn it up. Turn it up. So John Edward Robinson was born in Cicero, Illinois, which is on the west edge of Chicago. And he was born on December 27th, 1943. His father, Henry, was an alcoholic, so we got that going for him. And his mother, Alberta, was like the one that was in charge of discipline. She was hardcore. She was always disciplining him for anything he did. And he was the middle child of 5 kids.
First of all, her name's Alberta. That sounds like a very strong name. Like I can just
True.
picture her with like a rolling pin, Alberta.
And she's like Miss Trenchbull from Matilda.
That's my favorite.
Yeah. But being the middle child in general is typically pretty difficult, and then out of 5 kids. So,
Yeah.
At 13 years old, John went to the Quigley Preparatory Seminary in Chicago. And this was a school for boys who wanted to be priests. And he left after a year due to like disciplinary actions. I'm sure they were really strict.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know much about the Catholic faith, but I can imagine that they don't put up with a lot.
Yeah, if he was dealing with the nuns, yeah, they got that ruler out,
Oh,
man.
jeez. And then he went to Morton Junior College in Cicero in 1961. He went to be an x-ray technician, but he left after 2 years, which I can imagine he would have been almost done with that program, but okay. Then he moved to Kansas City in 1964 to get away from being accused of embezzling, which this is going to come up many more times. But he moved to Kansas City and he married Nancy Jo Lynch when he was only 21 years old. They had a son in 1965 they named John Jr., and then they had a daughter in 1967 that they named Kimberly. And then 2 years later, he was arrested for the first time. And he was arrested for embezzling $33,000, which I did the math, is nearly $230,000 in today's money.
Wow.
I always wonder, how do you get away with that much money? Like, I am terrified. Well, I don't work with money anymore at my job, but if I ever did cashier's jobs, like, I would be nervous if the drawer was even off a penny. Like, how do people embezzle?
Yeah, no. I mean, I could see maybe if you're desperate and you swipe $50 or something, you think, okay, maybe they won't see that, but $200,000+?
Do you think you'd notice that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and he did that like by manipulating checks and deposits. So I guess back in the 60s. So, and he embezzled this money from the practice of Dr. Graham. And this is a fun fact. This doctor was actually President Truman's personal doctor.
So he embezzled from the doctor.
Yeah, from the practice, and he was working there as an x-ray technician using fake credentials because remember, he didn't graduate.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Can you imagine what those fake credentials look like? Because they didn't have the internet just to like print off fake credentials.
It's just typed up.
Yeah. I can just imagine him like a napkin written with lipstick. He's like, X-ray tech. There's my credentials.
Yeah, just trust me.
Yeah. And he only received 3 years probation for this. So I guess
Wow.
first offense, maybe.
They say if he had to pay back the money?
I think he did end up paying back. He had to pay a fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Then in 1970, John moved to Chicago without his parole officer's permission, and he took a job as an insurance salesman at R.B. Jones Company. And his wife had twins in 1971. They named them Christopher and Christine. In 1971, the same year his twins were born, he got caught embezzling money at the insurance company, and he was like extradited back to Kansas City, and his probation was extended. Still no jail time.
Okay.
And in 1976, after being arrested again for fraud and for mail fraud, after creating a fake medical consulting company called Professional Service Association Incorporated, his probation was extended again for 3 years. Still no jail time. How many chances is this guy going to get?
White man privilege.
Oh, yeah. And in 1977, the family moved to the Pleasant Valley Farms neighborhood. While living there, he had a really good role in the community. He was a family man. He always attended his kids' concerts, recitals, games, everything. He was like A+ dad. He was a scoutmaster for the Boy Scouts. He was a baseball coach. He was a Sunday school teacher. And he even joined a board of directors for a local charitable organization. And while he was doing that, he like forged a bunch of letters from like the mayor and all these other local community leaders saying how great he was. And then all these fake letters led to him being named the Man of the Year.
Wow.
he's creating this fake world for himself where he's just like the top of the top. But nobody had any idea about his past because, couldn't just look this up on the internet. And he portrayed himself as this amazing man. Mm-hmm. So who would think? And in 1979, he was finished with his probation. He didn't last long because then he was arrested in 1980 for embezzlement and check forgery. And this time he finally spent some time in jail. He spent 60 days in 1982. So 2 years later.
In 2 months he got, right?
Yeah, he got 2 months. After getting out of jail in 1982, he created a hydroponics business that he called HydroGrow Incorporated. Not gonna lie, didn't know what a hydroponics business was. So I looked it up, and he grew vegetables without soil.
Yeah, that's kind of more popular now. I didn't even know that they were doing anything like that way back then. So he might have been like ahead of his time in that regard, because we do have hydroponic companies like now in California that I've seen. But I didn't know what that was either when they first started springing up, and it wasn't that long ago. So
I feel like we don't have them a lot here. But
we have no water, so we have to do something.
I was going to say, yeah, we get lots of water. And at this time, he also talked to his neighbor and talked her into investing $25,000 into some sort of investment opportunity, which is around $65,000 now. And he promised her, like, oh, it'll be a fast turnaround. You'll get this money back really quickly. Never repaid her. And also at this time, he started sexually propositioning his neighbors' wives. And one of those propositions ended up leading to a fist fight with one of the husbands. So he's starting some sexual stuff before this and never really saw anything about him being like overly sexual. Not sure what changed in his life that he needed to start propositioning. And then he quickly joined a sadomasochism secret group called the International Council of Masters.
Okay, that's quite a leap from Mr. Community Perfect Family Man to what is going on there, man?
I know. I looked this thing up because I was like, what is this? Basically, it's this like underground group of people where they lure victims to like their meetings and then they torture and rape them.
What?
And the girls, I'm assuming just girls, maybe guys too, but the victims wore leashes and other things. I just picture kind of like BDSM, but not a two-way street.
Yeah. Thinking like Lake and Eng kind of stuff. Because you said these are, they're not consenting adults.
No, they're victims. Okay. They're being lured there. It's I almost look at it like human trafficking, but for their own benefit.
Right. No, that's crazy.
Yeah. And then if the women tried to escape, they were punished. So not consenting, like you said. And I'm not really sure how this works, but apparently your peers can kind of like rate and review you on how you deal with bringing victims in and if you're good at it and blah, blah, blah. And after, like, he had a really good ability to bring victims in.
It's like, what's he got, like a 4-star rating?
Right. Like,
what is this?
I know.
Oh, my God.
So they started calling him the slave master.
Oh,
This is going to come up again.
He gets he's rated with 4 whips.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I don't know what that means. You fill out like a comment card. How are these ratings happening?
Oh my God, that's horrible.
Yeah. So at this point, he's just in a sadomasochism secret group, but he's also like family man. Nobody knows what's happening.
Businessman. Yeah.
Yeah.
So during the same time, Robinson started a management consulting service that he named EquiPlus. He was hired by companies to develop marketing plans and other business services. In that company, he began invoicing companies for non-existent or overinflated consulting services. So he's still running scams with his legitimate companies.
He can't stop.
He can't stop. No, can't stop, won't stop. One such company reported Robinson and EquiPlus to the district attorney, who began an investigation. Not deterred by being under investigation, Robinson started another company called Equi 2. I guess he couldn't do business under Equi whatever, and so he did Equi 2.
So he didn't even really change the name. He just like added a 2. Like they're not going to put that together at all. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was deep undercover. This company was supposedly engaging in a variety of businesses and philanthropic ventures. Under this company in 1984, he hired a recent high school graduate named Paula Godfrey. She was an honor student and an accomplished figure skater. Robinson, or JR, he also went by JR.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Robinson told Paula that he would enroll her in an all-expenses-paid training course in Texas. So on the day she was to leave for this trip to Texas, she was picked up at her parents' home in Overland Park by him to take her to the airport. So when her parents didn't hear from her for several days, they called the police to report her missing.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. The police then questioned Robinson, but he told them he had no idea where she could be. Shortly after that, police received a letter. Now we're going to get to this. You alluded to that earlier. They received a letter signed by Paula Godfrey saying that she was okay and that she did not want to see her family. Because she was over 18 and there was no evidence anything untoward had happened, Overland Park police suspended the investigation. But some now believe that Paula Godfrey was perhaps Robinson's first murder victim.
Sounds like it.
Mm-hmm. Well, she just disappeared. No, yeah, she decided she didn't want to see her family. Yeah, that's very plausible.
Especially with the letters.
Yeah, the letters. Yeah, and we're gonna hear more about that. Soon after her disappearance, Robinson began another ruse. In December 1984, he told social workers at the Truman Medical Center in Kansas City and an organization called Birthright that provided counseling and support to young unwed mothers that he, along with several other local business owners, had begun an organization called Kansas City Outreach. This organization provided housing for mothers and their babies, as well as provided job training and babysitting services to them. In January 1985, Birthright connected Robinson with a 19-year-old woman named Lisa Stassi. Lisa had just given birth to her daughter, Tiffany. Lisa at that time was separated from her husband, and she needed housing. Robinson offered Lisa and Tiffany an available apartment located on Troost Avenue in South Kansas City. That's where the Troost comes in.
Yeah.
Robinson met with Stassi but introduced himself as John Osborne. He could help her find job training in Chicago and would also secure housing for her there. While he made the arrangements, he put Lisa and the baby up in the Roadway Inn motel. Before leaving, he had Lisa sign 4 sheets of blank stationery and give him the addresses of her relatives. I think alarm bells should have been going off before.
Yeah.
Right? He's going to take her to Chicago with the baby and okay. But if they weren't going off before, if not then, definitely now.
With the signing the papers.
Right.
That's some H.H. Holmes stuff. I mean, he made some of his fiancés sign papers and then he would send them saying like, oh, we've gotten married and if you don't hear from me, that's why. And it's like,
yeah, that just seems very sketch, right? He told her he would notify her family of her whereabouts and activities as she would be far too busy in Chicago to write letters. Lisa left the Roadway Inn the day before she was to travel from Kansas to Chicago with John because she wanted to spend some time with her family. They, of course, were skeptical of John's claims, but Lisa was sure it was a good move for her. She left that day with John, leaving behind her own car and most of her possessions. The next morning, having a bad feeling about the whole deal, Lisa's sister-in-law called the Roadway Inn. Lisa's bill had been paid by a man named John Robinson, not John Osborne.
Oh, slip up.
And using a company credit card in the name of Equid 2. So now they have a tie to look for this guy, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah. That same evening, John was celebrating at his home with his wife and brother and sister-in-law, Don and Helen Robinson. Don and Helen had been trying for years to adopt a baby. John told them he'd been able to broker a private adoption deal.
Oh no.
They flew from Chicago to Kansas City, where John took them to the offices of Equid 2. He presented them with official-looking adoption papers, which they signed, and then gave him a balance of money. The total amount that they had given him was $5,500. So they had given him like $2,000 before, and then they paid the rest that day. He then drove them to his home, where his wife Nancy was waiting with an infant girl.
All right, hold on just a second. Nancy.
Nancy.
Where do you think this baby came from?
Okay.
All right.
Okay, we'll get to it, because he had brought this baby home the night before, unannounced. He didn't, he basically showed up with the baby. Told Nancy, hey, look, I found a baby for brother-in-law.
Okay.
Okay. So the baby had become available for adoption, he told them, because the mother committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, think about it, because he was working with this, supposedly he had this outreach organization,
Oh, right.
He was working with Birthright, so he was somehow able to make it look like they were already working with mothers, young mothers, unwed mothers. And so this woman had this baby, but then she committed suicide. He had to find a home for this baby, and he's a great, civic leader and community guy, so he got this baby,
This is a long con.
Found her a home. Okay. They named the baby Heather and flew home the following day, January 11th, to Chicago. Of course, they didn't know that she already had a name, Tiffany Stassi. That same day, a family member of Lisa Stassi showed up to the office of Equid 2 to confront Robinson about the whereabouts of Lisa and Tiffany. During the confrontation, Robinson physically threw the man out of his office. Lisa's family then contacted the Overland Park Police Department and reported her and the baby missing. 2 years later, in January 1987, a 27-year-old woman named Catherine Clampett began working for Robinson. She had been lured to Kansas from her home in Texas after answering a newspaper ad for a job promising lots of travel and a new wardrobe as part of the job's perks.
All right.
Yeah, some of these, do you think it's the times that people are just very trusting?
So.
That you're going to leave, you're going by yourself with this guy. You don't know him from Adam. I don't know. It just seems like that's a very, very trusting thing to do for a lot of these women. I'm not trying to victim blame at all, but it just, maybe we're more jaded now. Maybe.
I think so. Not going to lie, though. If I saw an ad for a job where they'd give me a whole new wardrobe, I might think about it.
Yeah. Where's wardrobe coming from? It's like, Kohl's maybe not, Neiman Marcus maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
You gotta have standards.
We'll negotiate. You're right. Standards.
Okay. So, poor Catherine Clampett. She leaves Texas, and she goes missing. This is in mid-1987, and her brother reported this to police. There was insufficient evidence to link her disappearance to Robinson, who by that time was on his way to serve out a prison sentence in Kansas, which now you'll tell us about.
And just putting that baby up for adoption.
I know. It's so sad.
I
think she was like 4 months old, 4 or 5 months old.
Can you imagine being the family that came to adopt her, thinking this is all normal, like this is a legit adoption? Oh, God. All right. So in January of 1986, John was convicted for fraud against back care systems. And then he was convicted again for frauding an Overland Park man who he made like an Arizona real estate deal with. But he didn't go to jail until May of 1987. And he was sent to Kansas State Penitentiary in Hutchinson. While he was there, he suffered a series of strokes that ended up paralyzing like part of his right side of his face. And he was paroled in January of 1991. But he was not going to go home because the moment he was paroled in Kansas, Missouri's like, bring him on over. He's got some things to serve over here. So he was sent to Missouri to serve more of his time, and he was first sent to Moberly Correctional Facility because of the strokes, and he had like some medical needs, and then they eventually transferred him to the Western Missouri Correctional Center, and he stayed there until the spring of 1993. While he was in jail, Nancy, his wife, sold their Pleasant Valley Farms house because she didn't have a working husband. Right. She couldn't keep this farm basically running, and then she started working at a mobile home park in Belton, Missouri, and then the family moved into this area as well. And while he was at Western Missouri Correctional Facility, John met the prison librarian Beverly Bonner. She was 49 years old, and he offered her a job at his business, but not Equiplus, but this time it was still Hydrogrow. I mean, how many businesses can this guy run? And he offered her the position of president of this company, which, prison librarian, president of a company, sure. So she left her husband and she moved to Kansas to work with John in 1994. She wrote to her mother saying she was traveling. She had a traveling job for this new business. I mean, she is the president of Hydrogrow. And she asked her mother to forward her mail, including her alimony checks, to a P.O. box in Olathe. And John cashed her checks for years, but she was never heard of again after he got a hold of the alimony checks. Like, I don't think she was heard of again after January, so she wasn't with him for long.
So let me get this straight. Okay, so she meets him as he's imprisoned.
He became her assistant. Like, that was his job.
But he was a prisoner.
He was a prisoner, and, like, his job in the prison was to help in the library. Mm-hmm. They formed some sort of relationship.
So, okay, so this guy's a prisoner. Obviously, you probably know what he's in prison for, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to go work for him at his company. I mean, that's a hard sell, I would think. This guy must have had some skills with the ladies there.
So.
I don't know how.
I don't know either. No idea. So after murdering Beverly, he discovered internet chat rooms. Guess what username he used?
Oh, God, don't tell me.
Slave Master.
I knew it.
All one word. And it's the early 90s, so he could get that. It wasn't like Slave Master 1.
Slave Master 53679.
Yeah, he is the original. He's the OG Slave Master. And he started looking for women in these chat rooms who wanted to be the submissive partner. So at least up front, he's looking for willing women. Right. They're not going to be willing to do what he wants, but he's looking for women who he can do his BDSM thing with.
So now we're up to the summer of 1994. Sheila Faith told friends that she planned to travel from her home in Pueblo, Colorado to Texas, making a stop on the way in Kansas to see her dream man. She simply identified him as John, no last name. She said that they had met through a personal ad she had placed in the newspaper. Faith's husband had died of cancer, and she was left to care for a disabled daughter, now a teen, who was confined to a wheelchair. So she had a pretty hard life at that time when she started talking to this John online.
And I'm sure...
Or in letters.
Yeah. Going to see him would probably make sense. You know, if you're going to go, you're unhappy and you want to go see your dream man, of course.
Lonely and living on a very fixed income, she was over the moon when she met John, who promised to take care of her and her daughter. She would never have to worry about money, he said. He had promised her wonderful things like taking her and her daughter on a cruise, something she could only have dreamed of before meeting John. While she was preparing for her upcoming trip to see John, out of the blue, he showed up in Colorado and picked up Sheila Faith and her daughter Debbie in the middle of the night.
She probably thought this was like a knight in shining armor.
Of course. Except they were never seen again.
Weird.
Yeah. And here's another one that goes back to what you just said. Later, it was discovered that their disability checks were being delivered to a post office box in where?
Olathe.
In Olathe.
He couldn't even pick a different suburb of Kansas City.
No. I mean, he knew the mailboxes, etc. He knew their hours. He knew how to get there.
That's true. You don't want to change your pattern.
No, it's just too much work. Robinson later moved on from targeting job seekers, single mothers, and lonely hearts widows to soliciting BDSM partners to fulfill his murderous deeds. Like we said, now he's moving into this next phase. He first met Isabel Levitska on the internet in early 1997. She was a freshman, so she was a young girl. She was a freshman at Purdue University in Indiana and a promising art student. In the spring of 1997, Isabel told her parents she had been offered an internship by a man in Kansas. She didn't give them any details. She left in June, taking all of her belongings, including all of her paintings. She gave them an Overland Park address where they sent her letters but received no reply. When they finally traveled to that address, they found out it was a branch of mailboxes, etc. The manager would not give them Isabel's contact information that he had on file. Unable to locate her, they returned to Indiana. They did not call the police.
Oh, this is the first one so far.
Yeah, and we don't really know why. Meanwhile, Isabel was living in an apartment paid for by Robinson. He visited her on a regular basis for BDSM sex sessions. She had signed a slave contract stipulating to 115 provisions he required of her as his submissive partner. In return, he paid all her bills and kept her in relative comfort. She enjoyed dressing all in black, sometimes also wearing dog collars as part of her ensemble.
Okay, so she's like consenting to
Yes.
this? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she was a very young girl. I mean, I think she was like 18, 19, somewhere around there. She was a young adult.
So it would seem nice that this man is providing everything for you.
Yeah, I mean, she's, he sets her in an apartment, she's consenting to this lifestyle, and, seems to be everything going fine, correct? In January 1999, he moved her to another apartment, this time in Olathe. The lease on that apartment was valid through January 2000, so for a year lease. But Isabel disappeared in August 1999. Isabel and her family were originally from Poland, and Robinson told a business associate that she had been caught smoking marijuana and been deported. That's how he...
All right.
Yeah. His next victim was 27-year-old Suzette Troughton from Michigan.
Of course, her last name is Troughton.
Troughton, yeah. Suzette was deeply involved in the BDSM culture as well, and had relationships with several dominants in the past. So the dominants are... So she's like the submissive. Mm-hmm. They're the dominants. So she always played the submissive, and now he was going to be her new dominant, apparently. She met Robinson on the internet in the fall of 1999, just weeks after Isabel disappeared. Suzette also worked as a home health care nurse, and Robinson had invited her to Kansas with an offer of a job. The job was to care for his elderly father, who he said was a rich man who enjoyed traveling but needed a companion to assist him. The truth was that Robinson's father had died a decade earlier. When Suzette arrived in Kansas, Robinson had a limousine meet her at the airport. I mean, he's like making this look legit, right? Because he's got this rich father, and he meets her at the airport in a limousine. So, I can see where she would be like, okay, this seems to be legit.
Yeah, right? It wasn't like a crappy Uber came and picked her up.
Yeah, he sent a bus pass. He told her she would be sailing with him and his father on their yacht, of course.
Oh, yeah. We have a lot of those in Kansas City.
So she'd be sailing with him and his father on their yacht to Hawaii. She was promised...
Hold on just a second. Okay. Does this lady know anything...
Geography?
About geography?
Yes.
Because, guys, Kansas is in the middle of the United States.
Landlocked, pretty much.
We do not have yachts. There's nowhere to put them.
Okay, well, he's getting to that.
Okay.
He's getting to that.
All right.
Okay. She was promised a salary of $60,000 per year, and I did the math too. That would be almost $90,000 in today's dollars. That's a big chunk of money.
Yeah, plus free travel.
Mm-hmm. She would also be given an apartment and a car.
Why does she need that when she's on a yacht?
Well, he was gonna give her that in Kansas. So apparently they would like sail on the yacht, come back to Kansas. Yeah, I don't know. That was
all right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway. Well, he's covering all bases.
So anyway, what happens is she comes out and he basically paints this big picture for her, tells her all the stuff. She's very excited.
Who wouldn't be?
Yeah, who wouldn't be? So then she goes back to Michigan to pick up all her belongings. Okay, and then she returned to Kansas in a moving truck, paid for by Robinson, and this was on February 14th. Valentine's Day. How cute. Yeah. She brought along, sorry, Haley, her 2 Pekingese dogs. She loved her little doggies.
If these dogs die, I'm going to be pissed.
Okay, I'll tell you right now. They do not die.
Oh, thank God. Keep going.
Okay. I wouldn't even have told you about the dogs if they had died.
Thank God.
Okay. Of course, she also brought all her BDSM equipment as well, because that's part of the job.
Is that why she needed the moving truck?
Probably, yeah. Most of it was that. He put her up in a motel, the Guest House Suites, in Lenexa, and boarded her dogs nearby, because the motel didn't allow pets, so he put them in a boarding thing, pet boarding. So what was going to happen is she was going to pick them up before they left for California. Okay, this is where this comes in. They're going to go to California to get on this yacht. They're not going to try to sail a yacht in Kansas.
All right.
Okay.
It's adding up.
So, because she's staying in this place, so he puts them in the boarding, and then he says, okay, before we leave, you can go pick them up. They can be on the yacht and sail with us. Okay.
All right. I'm
yes.
in.
Okay. Good. We're good, right? So before they left for California, that was the plan. And then they'd all get on the yacht and go sail to Hawaii.
Yeah.
They would be leaving in 2 weeks, during which time he told her to get a passport. He also had her sign.
Why does she need a passport?
I don't know. Unless they decide, I guess if they decided, I don't know. I don't know. That's, yeah, you're right. I don't know why.
Yeah. But let me guess, he had her sign like a letter?
Okay. Oh, he had her sign more than a letter, honey. He also had her sign more than 30 blank sheets of stationery and address 40 envelopes to family and friends. This is going to be a long trip, Haley. There's going to be a lot of letters flying around.
But, okay, that's not a red flag at all.
Okay. But here's the thing. But he would take care of her correspondence while they traveled. Okay, this is where I have to say, okay, what is going on here? I don't get why anybody would do this. And I know we already discussed this, but why? Okay. First of all, you're signing these blank pieces of paper because he's going to write letters for you to your family. I can understand, okay, well, I really can't understand. But the fact that he said, you're going to be too busy. You're not going to have time to write these letters, right? Even if you didn't have time to write the letters, would you have somebody else write letters for you and sign your name? Who does that?
No. And how's he going to, fake her handwriting?
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. And this is where we'll see how it kind of gets tripped up, okay? So, I mean, I was just thinking that as I was writing this. I'm like, even if I didn't have time to do it myself, which I probably would find time. You're on a yacht. What are you going to do all day?
She's
you know
sunbathing.
What I mean? Yeah, exactly. This guy doesn't need 24-hour care. You're on a yacht. And it's like, meanwhile, I'm thinking she's never met this old man. She couldn't have.
Right, if he's in California.
Because there was no old man.
Yeah, that's
his father was dead. So who would...
He was the old man. He's missed out fire or whatever.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, maybe he could have said this father was in California, but that doesn't make sense either because she was coming to Kansas to take care of... I don't understand this whole story. I don't know. But yeah, anyway, that whole letter writing thing, I don't know how anybody bought that. If anybody agreed to that. But.
I'm not signing shit. Guys, don't ever sign your name on a blank piece of paper.
No. We've learned this several times in different cases already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But Suzette at that time was communicating online with a friend in Canada named Lori. And this was a good friend of hers, and they were always emailing, I guess, back and forth all the time. And almost every day they were emailing each other. She was also calling her mother, Carolyn, in Michigan every day. So daily she was talking to her mother.
Good.
The last call she made to her mother was on February 29th, Leap Day, right?
Oh.
Yeah, February 29th. I thought that was a strange date, and I thought, oh yeah, Leap Day. She told her mother that she was fine, that John was very nice, and they would be leaving for California in 2 days. She would call her frequently while they were traveling, she told her. The following afternoon, on March 1st, Robinson checked her out of the guest house suites and also checked her dogs out of the boarding facility. No one saw Suzette that day. Also later that day, someone called animal control to the office of the Santa Barbara Mobile Home Park. 2 dogs without collars were left in an unattended kennel in the front of the office.
Oh, God.
Robinson and his wife lived in the Santa Barbara Estates Mobile Home Park.
Well, that wasn't very smart of him.
Yeah, why wouldn't you put them anywhere else? Or drop them off at the Humane Society, or
don't kill this poor woman.
Yeah.
Set our dogs free.
Yeah.
Give them to me.
Somebody did pick up the dogs, and they were rehomed because nobody came to pick them up.
Thank God.
Obviously they were abandoned, right? Suzette's mother, Carolyn, and her friend Lori became concerned when they hadn't heard from her in over a week. They then called Robinson. He told them that she had changed her mind about taking the job and had run off with a man named James Turner. Neither one of them believed him.
Good.
In mid-March, they began receiving letters and emails signed by Suzette, but they didn't sound like her. Now, these are people that correspond with her all the time.
Right. So they would know what kind of things she said, what kind of language,
Right.
her voice, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're like, no, this was not written by her. And they believed at that point that Robinson had done something to her, and they contacted the police. John Robinson's name had come up when other women had gone missing in the 1980s, remember?
Mm-hmm.
But those reports had been quickly dismissed. But at that time, those reports were all, I think, the ones that I researched were all Overland Park police that had been reported to. This time, the report was made to the Lenexa Police Department, and Detective David Brown took it seriously and began an investigation. Thank God for Detective Brown.
Yeah.
Right? He quickly saw the possible connection to the other missing women, and a task force was formed made up of several local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, including the FBI. Detective Brown also told Suzette's family to tape their conversations with Robinson, because he was still communicating with them, and send all emails to and from him to the Lenexa police. So they were really doing their work here, find out what's going on. Meanwhile, J.R. Robinson, going by the name James Turner, had met another BDSM partner online. He brought her to Kansas and moved her into the same motel. He's
getting sloppy.
Yeah, and he has the same habits. Like, he keeps doing the same things.
Mm-hmm.
So he moved her into the guest house suites where he'd kept Suzette. They began a sexual relationship, but he became more and more aggressive and threatening with her.
Mm-hmm.
He just started getting out of control here.
I think they escalate and you get really full of yourself and you just keep trying new things.
Yeah, like that power and that, being able to really be in control, and to the point where it became very abusive.
Yeah.
After one particularly rough encounter with James, because that's what he's calling himself, she ran sobbing to the motel's front desk and asked to see the registration card. So I'm thinking at this point she must have just had, you get that sixth sense that you listen to that tells you something's off here.
Yep.
Like, this is not okay. And so she decided to check it out. So she asked him to see the registration card. She discovered that it was registered not to James Turner, but to John Robinson. She called the police and told them her story. Detective Brown, heard about that. And I was like, oh, another John Robinson victim. But now he has one who he can talk to.
Right, one that's not missing.
Exactly.
This woman, after she talked to Detective Brown, she filed a sexual battery case against him. And this led police to arrest him on June 2nd at the Santa Barbara Estates. And he was shocked to be arrested. Like, so full of himself to think that he would never get caught. He's like, sometimes when criminals are caught, they're just kind of like, yeah, you got me. But he was just like in denial about it. And they took him to jail, and they had a search warrant to search the house, and they've seized his 5 computers. This is 2000. It'd be weird to have 5 computers now.
Yeah.
Can't imagine how freaking weird it was to have 5 computers.
Yeah, I think
2000.
if somebody in 2000 had 2, that was probably, you're like a whole techie person, right?
Yeah, you're like gaming or you're in IT or something.
Yeah.
And they found blank sheets of paper signed by Lisa Stassi.
Wow, that's way back.
From I think it was 15 years.
1985.
Prior.
Wow.
So, that's a tie. How are you going to explain that, And then they also found a receipt showing that he had checked her out of the hotel the day before she disappeared. Okay. Who holds on to the receipts for 15 years? Let alone evidence.
Hoarder.
Yeah. So then these findings gave them probable cause to get search warrants for his other property. And his other property included a 16-acre farm near Lacine, Kansas, which is south of Kansas City. It's a rural area. Okay. During their search of the farm, cadaver dogs found decaying bodies in 2 yellow 55-gallon chemical drums. One of the bodies was Isabel Levitska, and the other body was Suzette Troughton. One of the bodies, I'm not sure which is which, but one of the bodies was naked, blindfolded, and lying face down in the fetal position with cloth securing a rope around her head, kind of like a blindfold, and she was in 14 inches of fluid in the barrel. And then the other body was found with like a pillow and a pillowcase. She was still clothed, and she was also found in fluid.
So I think that I read a detail about that where I believe the naked one was Isabel, because I believe they said she had several piercings.
Oh yeah, she had like nipple piercings and all kind of stuff. So that would make sense.
Yeah, I think that was how they first kind of were able to determine it was probably her.
Oh, okay. And so then another area they searched was a storage facility called Store More for Less in Raymore, Missouri. And he had rented 2 spaces there. The reason he rented them was because, like I said earlier, when his wife had to move out of the farm and they had to move into a mobile home, they had to downsize, and they had rented 2 storage facilities for the overflow. And so, like, in the back of the storage facility, they found 3 other chemical drums. And they included the bodies of Beverly Bonner, Sheila Faith, and Debbie Faith. They each had their own barrel. And each drum was labeled rendered pork fat.
Oh, God. Are you kidding me? I didn't even hear that detail, and it was already horrible enough.
Yeah. And then the coroner, looked at the bodies and everything, and he determined that they all died from blows to the left side of the head with a blunt instrument, most likely a hammer. He believes all of them died instantly, which is good.
Yeah.
And that none of them put up a fight, so he probably came up behind them, hit them, they died. I know some of them didn't have full bodies. Like one of them, because they were searching the whole storage facility, one of the people on scene opened the top of the barrel and saw a shoe and lifted the shoe out, and it was just a leg. So then he immediately closed it up, and then they just took the 3 barrels to the crime, to the lab.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
we're not even looking in these. And so I don't think they were full bodies anymore.
Yeah.
They had decomposed.
Yeah.
After finding the bodies of Isabella and Suzette in Lacine, he was arraigned and charged for 2 counts of first-degree murder, also with aggravated kidnapping of Suzette, and he had a $5 million bond, which that's like a joke, right? I mean, you're not gonna...
Yeah, he's not going anywhere.
And then after the findings in the storage facility, because that was a couple days later, he was arraigned again and was charged with additional counts of first-degree murder for Beverly, Sheila, and Debbie. He went to trial in 2002 in Kansas, because we have crimes committed in different states, and so they weren't really sure who was going to have jurisdiction.
Right.
And so they decided to have 2 separate trials, one in Kansas and one in Missouri. The Kansas trial was for Suzette, Isabella, and Lisa, and it was the longest criminal trial in Kansas history at that point.
Wow.
Which is bananas. On the last day of trial, the jury deliberated for 11 hours, and he was found guilty on all counts on October 28th, 2002. He was sentenced on January 21st, 2003. They decided to give him the death penalty, and he was officially sentenced by a judge on January 21st, 2003. He was sentenced to the death penalty by lethal injection for the murders of Troughton and Levitska, and he was given life imprisonment for Stasi because there was no death penalty when he killed her.
Oh, okay. So that was so far before that.
Right. And then he was given an additional 25 plus years for the kidnapping, theft, and all kinds of things like that. He was extradited to Missouri to face trial in March of 2003. He pled not guilty to those murders.
Whoa.
And the trial was set for March of 2004, so they were giving the prosecution a year. And I guess they were really nervous about their case because their evidence wasn't as strong as it was in Kansas. A lot of it was really circumstantial, and they were nervous that if they didn't make a plea that he wouldn't be found guilty. And so the prosecution was really pressured into making a plea deal. And so in October of 2003, he finally made a plea deal so that he wouldn't face the death penalty. And he was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the 3 murder charges against Beverly, Sheila, and Debbie. And part of the deal was that he also had to confess to any other crimes. And, they didn't say this, but I think the way it works is if they found out later that he lied to them, they could take back that and be like,
deal,
nope,
right?
now you got the death penalty.
Yes. Right.
And so, although he wasn't charged with these murders, he did confess to the murders of Paula Godfrey and Catherine Clampett.
Okay.
So he wasn't charged. He officially has been charged with 5 murders, but in total, 7.
And they mainly do that for the family, so the family can have some closure to know what happened.
Yeah, which is great. He was sent to the El Dorado Correctional Facility, and he sits on death row there at this point.
If you listen to my podcast, Once Upon a Crime, you know that I always try to end with an update. So I try to anticipate a question that the listeners will have, because I have this question, and then I try to find the answer to that. I'm thinking the question your listeners might have about this case is the question, what happened to baby Tiffany?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to know.
Yeah. So as you recall, it was 4-month-old Tiffany was adopted by Robinson's brother and sister-in-law, and she was raised by them in the Chicago area. When Robinson was arrested in 2000 and the story came out, Tiffany was then 15 years old.
Oh, God.
She looked up the stories of the missing people believed to have been killed by Robinson and came across her own baby picture. So, yes. So that's how they kind of figured out. And this is one of the things we had talked about, was that there are still supporters of this guy, which was his family, were saying, he's a good man, he's a good father, whatever.
Right.
Right? So it was very hard for people to believe that he was responsible for these horrible things, right? And one of them was his brother and sister-in-law,
Well, yeah, you don't want to admit that this all happened, because then you'd admit that, holy crap, this girl you adopted.
Yeah. So it took a little time for that to sink, because they needed the information. So, and they're going to find this out in a minute. But his brother Don was stunned. He was stunned. He couldn't believe it. But then fingerprints were then taken from Heather. Her name now is Heather. Her name is, and she goes by Heather. Her fingerprints were then taken from Heather and compared to those taken at Tiffany's birth. They matched and confirmed that Heather was indeed Tiffany Stassi. All the media surrounding the case caused Heather to be hounded at school, and she dropped out. It's really sad. I know. It was really sad.
Leave her alone.
I know.
She had nothing to do with this.
Nothing to do. But it was I'm sure here it was such a huge case, right? So, of course, what is reporters are going to do? They want to know this, because this is something. I mean, we want to know this, but I think we want to know because we want to know what happened to her. Is she okay? How does this all end? But reporters want a story. That's just the nature of the game, right? So they were all kind of swarming, and she couldn't handle it. The uncertainty of her life now also took a toll, as did the thoughts that she says that she could not put aside about how her mother might have died. So now this all came. She had no idea of any of this, like even to remember her mother, nothing, right? And then remember, because her mother's body was never found. And then the other thing that was really, on her head was that she was afraid that she might lose the only parents that she had ever known was, Don and
right.
And
she's a minor. They might take her away.
Exactly. This is not your legal child, right? And so she was terrified. Where am I going to end up? This is the whole thing is horrible. This guy, what he did had a ripple effect so wide, She began to suffer from depression and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. Later, thank God, her parents, the only parents she knew, were allowed to adopt her legally. They let them, because it was determined by the courts that they'd had no knowledge of Robinson's crimes and believed the adoption to be legitimate. So they had no,
God.
They were not guilty of anything. She'd known them her whole life. They didn't want to make her suffer more, penalize her for his crimes against her mother. So they allowed her to be legally adopted. Thank God for that. But then Heather Robinson filed a lawsuit against her uncle, J.R. Robinson, in 2004 for the pain, suffering, and loss she experienced because of his crimes. At his deposition, taken as part of the lawsuit, he would only give his name and refuse to answer any other questions. Didn't he do that in the court case too?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that was, he just wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 2007, so she filed this in 2004. 3 years later, in 2007, when Heather was 22, she won her lawsuit against J.R. Robinson and was awarded, wait for it, $5 billion in court.
Okay, that seems...
It's a bit extravagant.
And where is this money coming from?
It's not, but here's why, okay? Of course, they didn't believe she would ever collect this money, but the courts made the amount that high because they wanted to make sure that Robinson would never profit from his crimes through a book or movie deal.
Good.
The district attorney said that he believed Robinson's, quote, failure to come clean and provide some closure in the case might be due to his motivation to someday profit from his story.
Well, yeah, he's been a con man his whole life.
Exactly. Yeah, they knew, his MO, they knew kind of, and they thought, and this was strange to me because I thought that was something that you couldn't do anyway, but apparently there are loopholes that you can get through and actually, so that they were trying to prevent this. The judge also said, this court does not have the power to silence defendant John E. Robinson Sr., but it does have the power to enter a judgment that will take away the profiteering agenda of the defendant. So that's why the high amount, because even if he ever made any money, there's no way he would ever be able to touch a penny, because everything would go to Heather, if he made any money ever in any way.
Wow.
Because that judgment was so huge, there's no way he'd pay it off.
That's so cool that they did that.
I know.
At first I was like, that's ridiculous. How does she think she's going to get that money?
Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm glad that she ended up doing that. And I can't even imagine the pain and suffering she went through.
Yeah.
You live 15 years of your life. First of all, being 15 is difficult.
Yeah.
Especially growing up in these times and being a girl, and I just can't even imagine. And then out of nowhere, you find out that you were sold to your family, and thank God her family had no knowledge of it, because that would be even worse.
That'd be horrible.
Find out your mom was murdered. Nobody knows where her body is.
No.
And, just can't. And then the thought of you're going to be ripped away from the only family you've ever known, and then who's going to adopt a 15-year-old?
Yeah.
Live the next 3 years of your life in foster care. And, my God.
And she was very desperate when she found out about all this. I mean, she was just spinning. It just sounded, the article I read with her interview was very heartbreaking, because she was just falling to pieces. She was trying, she didn't know what to do. She didn't know what to think. She didn't know who to trust. She had nightmares, and on and on. She tried everything. She was even consulting psychics and, people that maybe be able to contact her mother from beyond. Just anything she could do to try to, I guess, just maybe understand what had happened or deal with it in some way. And she just sounded like she was so messed up.
Oh my God.
So I just hope she's doing better now. It's several years down the road now. But yeah, it was pretty bad. But fortunately, she did have parents who loved her. They adopted her because they really wanted a child. And for all intents, from everything that I've heard, that they were very good parents. She loved them, and they were very good to her. And, it sounded like they were really trying to get her the help that she needed to deal with. And them too. They were victims too.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to trust anybody again.
Yeah.
You were taken advantage of. And
yeah. Everybody trusted this guy.
He reminds me so much of H.H. Holmes. The signing the letters, being a con man, and then basically, I think, murdering to cover up your cons, and just moving people from all over, because that's what he would do. He would find these victims, and then he would be like, well, write to them, and you can come work for me, and then they'd disappear, and it's like he was a modern day.
Yeah. And also, H.H. Holmes knew what to say to them to entice them.
Exactly. You would think that because of the time I think we're living in, we're less trusting, but he also, like you said, he knew what to say.
He knew what to say. Yeah, these guys are, that's the thing, is they have that ability to manipulate in a way that people don't see it coming. Everybody thought this guy was a great guy, and even though he was living this, okay, I can see, so let's say, BTK, right? He was living his life as a normal guy, and doing all these murders and stuff. So we're like, oh my God, that's already bad. But this guy was living half the time as a normal guy and half the time when these bondage, how did he keep all those plates in the air?
No, not well.
Well, it took a while though.
I want to know more about Nancy. Did he ever try to get her to be a submissive? Yeah. It's like, I want to know more about that. Did she truly not know anything? It
seems to me like a lot of these guys will have a partner that they do keep in the dark. Think Ted Bundy, who had the long-term girlfriend, who she didn't know anything about.
Zero
what
things.
He was, nothing, and there's several, the wives of some of these serial killers, they had no clue, You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I kind of think maybe she was the same. The only thing that I did have the question is about, he just shows up with the baby and you're okay with that? Like,
But, did you ever read the case? I remember listening to your kidnapping series, and I was looking at more kidnappings because that's something that absolutely fascinates me. And I looked up, the guy from Austria,
oh, Fritzl.
Fritzl, Joseph Fritzl. He, kept his daughter in his basement for a long time, and he had multiple babies with her. But he brought one of the babies upstairs and, like, told his wife that their daughter, who had run away to join a cult, had just randomly showed up and dropped this baby off so that they could adopt it. And I'm like, you didn't question that?
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't ever go to your basement? That's my question.
Oh my God, I know. But I just wonder, do these killers pick these submissive partners who aren't going to question anything?
I would think so. They're going to pick the ones who are more, either gullible or just will go along with the program. Maybe they're just not that strong on their own. They need them, they're that kind of thing. The more dependent.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. There are a few that I've come across where I'm like, I think they knew something.
Right. Do you have like this gut? That's kind of what I meant was like, did she know something? I don't think she knew. Like, I don't think he was telling her.
Right.
But I'm like, did she know in her gut? Like, something is wrong.
Right.
I just.
Yeah. No, you live with somebody, you think you would know.
Yeah. I would not be a good serial killer's wife because if my husband even looks at me, I'm like, what are you looking at? Like, I question everything, So
Question everything.
I'd be like,
that was the slogan for the.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, so I would never. Well, you know what? Maybe my husband is a serial killer.
But that's the thing, though. When we talk about this and we say, well, when you pick something up, we're thinking about when we're dealing with normal people. Right? Normal people that deal in the world that we live in, that they go by those rules, they have the same value structure and all that stuff. We're talking about sociopaths. We're talking about people with no conscience. We're talking about people who have no sense of guilt or remorse,
right,
or feeling for anybody or anything. So they can hide very well everything.
Well, they learn to imitate, right?
Right.
They watch. And because if you want to fit in, you have to learn how to act like everyone else around you. You cannot be the symptoms of a sociopath where you would be discovered. You cannot be like that. You have to learn how to react to these things. And that's what makes them so terrifying, is because
they're hiding in plain sight.
They're like chameleons.
Yeah.
You don't know unless you really get in there. And like,
and that's what we always say, you can't go by what you see sometimes. You have to go by what your gut tells you.
Yeah.
And even if you don't know why, I think it's okay to say, yeah, you know what, I'm getting away from this person because something just feels off. Don't ever feel bad about it. I talked about that in the kidnapping series, just like you were saying. Some of them that had a chance to make a decision, that they felt something was off, but they didn't want to seem rude.
That happened a lot. I was just researching Ted Bundy, and you just brought him up. That happened a lot with his surviving victims. Mm-hmm. They just wanted to help him get his books to his car, and it's like they didn't want to seem rude, like you said.
They count on that. They count on people who are, are polite, mm-hmm. who will say, oh, sure, mister, I'll help you. Meanwhile, why don't you pick a man to help you carry your heavy crap? You know what I mean? Why are you picking on young, small women to do it? Right there, come on, you guys. If they're just like, oh, I'm sorry, but I'll go find somebody to help you. That's what you say.
They watch
and you run
men,
like hell.
Yeah, they watch the men walk by, and the first woman they see. I don't know. I would always like to say that I'm not going to fall victim, but I'm also like, I think I'm a nice person. Like, I probably would be like, yeah, I'll help you too. I
do find myself reacting that way instinctively when somebody, approaches me. Like I'll get, like say like you're walking down a street and it's dark, right? And you're by yourself and you're a female especially. And somebody's coming towards you and you are like not feeling safe, right? My first instinct is not to cross the street because I feel like that's being rude. You know what I mean?
You
Or
don't want
judging.
them to think that you're terrified of them,
Yeah.
and you don't want to stereotype them and stuff.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. I'm like, I'm really scared right now. I want to get away from them, but I don't want them to think that I think they're a threat, and I don't want to hurt their feelings because maybe they're just walking down the street just like I am.
See, what we should do is we should practice. Like, we should just go outside, but go with a buddy, and walk down a dark street. And as soon as you see somebody coming down the street, you should start screaming at the top of your lungs and run, and just make it a joke. Because here's the thing, it's called, a muscle memory.
Yeah.
So you will do that when you actually feel that way. And somebody's going to think you're a friggin' nut, but who cares? You don't know these people.
That's true.
So.
Yeah, that is such a good point. I know that about myself where I am. I try to be polite. I'm just like, my first reaction is
That's how we're trained as females to be be polite, don't make, accommodating.
We're
be accommodating.
great victims.
Oh God, no.
No, just women in general. I never thought of it like that. I thought maybe it was just me.
No, I think, but I think we have to really rethink that and really know. I mean, the first thing you have to do is be aware of how you actually think and feel, and then tell yourself, okay, does that make sense as far as keeping myself safe? Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, then it's like, oh no, it's okay to think something different. It's okay to do something different. Don't worry about that. But we never say that out loud.
Right.
We just kind of think it, and we're like, no, but that's not nice. Always be nice. No, don't be nice.
Protect yourself.
Protect yourself. Yeah.
I gotta keep that in mind. I know I'll do stuff like I'll be sitting in my car and I'll realize that my doors aren't locked, but then somebody will be walking, and I don't want them to think that I'm locking my doors because they're walking by me. So I always wait till they walk by me, and then I hurry up and lock my doors.
That's too late, Haley. They're in your backseat.
I know. That's like the guy in my freaking logo.
Exactly what I was thinking. He's in your backseat, Haley. You should know better.
Yeah. You're right, though. We shouldn't worry about that.
No.
We should be worrying about ourselves.
Yeah, you need to protect yourself. Not to say to be paranoid, but be aware, be cautious, be safe. That's all. And I think we should teach that also to our friends and our daughters, and same thing, because we know that the world can be unpredictable. Most people are nice, and even if you did protect yourself and somebody was a nice, good person, they would probably say, good for you.
Right.
They would probably applaud you for that. To say, yeah, because you don't know me. That's cool. I wouldn't be offended if somebody was like, oh my gosh, she looks sketchy, getting away.
Well, that's how I feel, actually. So thanks for bringing that up. Make me feel better. I'd love to know, I don't know if I have any BDSM listeners, but is the name Slave Master, would that be like, because to me, that's terrifying. Mm-hmm. I don't know a lot about the BDSM culture. I'd love to know more. But to me, if I saw the username Slave Master, I'd be like, no. But I don't know if I have any listeners out there, but is that like a weird name? Would that be like a turn on if you're a submissive and you're like, oh, a slave master, that means he's dominant? So I'd love to know if anyone can answer that question for me.
I don't know either, but I'm thinking if it's, because we said earlier it was not consenting. Mm-hmm. And then later on it was like people who were consenting and this was their choice.
Right.
The only problem is that he got to a point where he didn't care whether you were consenting or not.
So I think the lady you were talking about that was in the last victim that ended up talking to Detective Brown, he went too far. Mm-hmm. So I think my understanding, and I could be way off, so I hope I don't offend anybody, but my understanding is that when you meet a new partner, you come to an understanding of, this is my safe word, these are the things I'm okay with. Mm-hmm. So like, I'm okay with flogging. I don't want you to pull my hair. Like, you have almost a contract of, this is what I'm going to do, and this is my safe word. He was going over the line. Like, he was flogging her, and she was not okay with it. And that's where it becomes assault.
Right.
Because just because you're into BDSM doesn't mean that your partner can do whatever they want to. Like, you have an agreement, and if they don't adhere to that agreement, then they're assaulting you and taking advantage of you, and that's what he was doing to her. He was not he had consenting victims, but then he would go past their consent, and that's not okay. And
I give her a lot of credit, because that is exactly what she told the officers when she called. Is she said, look, this was something that I was, consented to this, but not that. and he would not stop when I told him that wasn't okay. So she was very, I think, courageous.
Oh yeah,
because she could have been judged.
Oh,
by the cops or whoever.
They could have just been like, no, he wasn't doing it. You said you'd have sex with him. What else is... It's almost like a prostitute where they feel like they cannot contact police because, well, just because you said you would receive money to give this guy a hand job doesn't mean he can force himself upon you. Like, that's still rape, And so I think you're right. That was very courageous because she very well could have been shut down by police, not taken seriously, and to really put yourself out there and be like, I'm into BDSM, we have this agreement, he was doing this, like that would be difficult.
And she actually was the one who, she was the witness that helped them to put him away.
Yeah, good for her.
Yeah, no, that she deserves a lot more credit than she probably gets, but I thought that was pretty courageous of her. I'm sure she was terrified, and she still spoke up about it.
I know I was reading the account of her going out to talk to the hotel receptionist, and she was like, you couldn't tell what she was saying. She was so upset.
Yeah.
I mean, he beat her.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. I mean, I'm just grateful that he didn't kill her like he did the others. And you kind of wonder, like, what was going on with him where maybe he felt like he could keep it going with her until he felt like he was done with her. I don't know when he decided to cross that line and say, get rid of these people.
That's a good question. Like, because he hasn't talked to people, what made him decide he was done with them? Yeah. Was it that they started, like, she didn't put up with it, immediately? Was it that, or just where did he kill them?
Yeah, I know.
There's so many questions that I'd love to know the answer to. We probably will never know.
No, he doesn't talk.
Which is fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he doesn't talk.
It's crazy.
But yeah, he ain't going anywhere, so I think we're okay
no.
as far as he's concerned.
Yeah, I mean, he sits on death row, El Dorado. So, do you have any final thoughts?
No, this was great. I mean, I thought it was so cool to actually be here and be around the area and be able to drive around a little bit, and that always makes it more. It almost makes it more real. Not that I want it to be real, but it makes it more relatable to actually be in that place where this happened and to see that. That's the other thing. It just seems like such a normal place with normal families and nice people and everything. So I can imagine that it was hard for these people to look at this guy and think, oh my God, he's a monster. I mean, that took them a while to really get to that, where they understood that this guy is a monster.
Right. And that's kind of what I love about the whole idea behind this podcast is that it's one thing to talk about the case, right? But then to physically go to that area, you're right, it does make it way more relatable. Like, you've seen the Troost Avenue sign, like you're in the city. And also we've been to different suburbs in the last couple of days, and now you realize that Overland Park and Olathe and Leawood and all these different places, they're not close together. No. Like, he's kind of like everywhere. And I mean, Kansas City isn't obviously the biggest city in the United States, but it is pretty big, and we have a lot of suburbs. And he was going all over, and then the farm an hour away. It's.
Yeah, he was a traveling man, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I like the way you said that. It is a lot more relatable. It's really interesting to be able to actually see it in person rather than just images online.
Right.
I like that a lot. I mean, sometimes it is kind of scary to be like,
now you know what happened there. Ah!
Yeah, it is an interesting feeling. So, well, thank you for coming along for the ride.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It was fun.
Yeah, it was really fun to do this in person. I should travel more. Go to everyone.
Next time at my place.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That would be so fun. Until next time, please remember to check your back seats, and I'll see you at the next rest stop. Thank you to content editor Laura Taylor for making my research sound coherent. You can find Murder Road Trip at murderroadtrip.com, on Instagram and Twitter at murdertrip, and on Facebook at MRT Podcast. If you're interested in continuing the discussion, you can join the Murder Road Trip podcast group on Facebook. Make sure to check out the Murder Road Trip playlist on Spotify. You can even add songs to the playlist. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe on your podcast app of choice. If you'd like to listen to the episodes before everyone else, listen to bonus content, and get exclusive merchandise, you can check out Murder Road Trip on Patreon. Please stay tuned after the music to hear from some other great podcasts.
This is Esther, host of Once Upon a Crime, a podcast that shares true crime stories chapter by chapter. Crimes are covered within series like, we're in the series Monstrous Moms and Dastardly Dads. This is Chapter 2, John List. Killer Kids, Chapter 1, Jesse Pomeroy. Murder in Paradise, Chapter 3, Missing in Aruba. This is Chapter 1, A Woman Scorned, Betty Broderick. As a storyteller, I share not only the details of the crime, but also my research into the backgrounds of the victims and perpetrators to try to understand why events unfolded as they did and to offer clues into how and why these crimes occurred. You can find more about the show on truecrimepodcast.com. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey podcast fans, I'm Rachel, host of We're All Mad Here, a new podcast about the history of mental health. Do you love history? Do you love creepy stories of abandoned hospitals? How about questionable medical procedures? We're covering it all. Not only will we sneak around in old asylums, we'll talk about the patients that stayed there and what their lives were like. We're covering disorders, cures, and living life with mental illness. So come join us on We're All Mad Here at allmadpod.com, because the history of mental illness is insane.
My name is Tanner Campbell, and you're listening to Haley Gray talk murder on the Murder Road Trip podcast with Haley Gray. I love storytelling podcasts, and Haley is a fantastic storyteller, which makes the show a joy to listen to. If you're a fan of good storytelling and are looking for another podcast to add to your library, consider checking out my show, the Legends, Myths, and Whiskey podcast. My friend Eric and I share traditional tellings of various myths and legends, and then discuss them, all while enjoying and reviewing a different whiskey in each episode. You can find the Legends, Myths, and Whiskey podcast on iTunes or at legendsmythsandwhiskey.com. Hope to see you soon. Now back to Haley and on with the show.